Well, it's a big moment in Africa, specifically in Angola, as the country votes the next president, Dos Santos, and who became president in 2017. His predecessor, and a man believed to have re-emerged fraudulently many times, spent 38 years in power. And of course, his corpse just arrived the country after he died in Spain in July. The party is facing its toughest run in decades, and there's a high likelihood that the opposition may emerge this time. But joining me to unpack this is Dr. Justin Pearce. He's a senior lecturer in history at the Stellenbosch University. He's also a researcher on Angolan history and politics. Justin, good to see you, and thanks for your time. Quickly, let us in on this moment that the world, specifically Africa, is watching in Angola. What do you think? Take us through the history about just one party has been in power till this moment.
Yeah, I mean, the MPLA took power on independence in 1975. It was a very contested independence process. There were three liberation movements fighting for Angola's independence from Portugal. And two of those movements, the MPLA and UNITA, ended up at war with each other right up until 2002. It was a conflict that was, I think, prolonged and deepened because of the international situation of the Cold War, but it also reflected some fairly deep divisions within Angolan society as well. 2002, UNITA's historic leader, Jonas Savimbi, is killed in action. The surviving leadership of UNITA agreed to peace very much on the terms set by the MPLA. As a result of this, José Eduardo dos Santos, who, as you said, had been president already since 1979, after the peace of 2002, dos Santos uses this to claim himself as the architect of peace. The architect of peace was the word, the term that he used, and really relaunched his political career in 2002 on the back of the end of the war, and also embarking on a process of reconstruction. Luckily for Dos Santos, this coincided, those years after 2002, obviously coincided with a boom in the oil industry, meaning that oil revenues expanded exponentially in Angola during that period. What this meant was the very rich became extremely rich. The country, though, became much more unequal in that process. So that while the MPLA was able to use that surge in oil revenue to consolidate its own victory in the civil war, there was also growing discontentment within society. So the first post-war election was 2008. In that election, the MPLA comes home with 80% of the vote. That's gradually been reduced to 70% of the vote in 2012, 60% in 2017. And this reflects, I think, the MPLA's old story about having been the party that brought peace to Angola. The validity of that story is wearing off with each new generation of voters, an increasingly young population for whom the civil war is no longer relevant. Dissatisfaction with inequality, with ongoing unemployment and poverty. Dos Santos steps down, as you say, 5 years ago in 2017, hands over to João Lourenço. João Lourenço's first promise when he takes power is that he is going to clean up the corruption of the Dos Santos era. One of the first things he did was to prosecute members of Dos Santos's family and other close associates who'd been implicated in corruption during the Dos Santos era. I think Lourenço managed to buy some goodwill in the first few years of his presidency by doing this. However, he was also governing in the middle of a profound economic crisis. The price of oil crashed in 2014. So that by the time Lourenço became president in 2017, even middle-class Angolans were really starting to feel the pinch. The middle class wasn't able to keep up with the lifestyle that it had got used to before 2014. So that at the same time, life for the poorest Angolans is as bad as it always was. And I think now with a new generation of voters in this election in 2022, this is the first time that young Angolans born after the Civil War are now able to vote. And I think all this adds up to the MPLA facing the biggest challenge that it's ever faced.
No doubt it's a big challenge. And again, some of the issues that observers and historians like yourself are following has to do with the human rights issues, which are a problem. And Lourenço's crackdown on corruption have been stated to only target his enemies, one of whom is Isabel dos Santos, the daughter of the man who picked him as his successor and who was at a time Africa's richest woman. Justine.
Yes, that's true. I mean, I think it was part of Lourenço's strategy, first to go after the most visible figures associated with dos Santos. I'm not going to say that governance in Angola under Lourenço has been completely clean. I think it has been an improvement on the past in that the change of regime has meant that the grand corruption of previous years couldn't continue in the way that it did. But I think the more profound crisis facing Lourenço is that he can't really meet the more immediate demands from society in an economy still heavily dependent on oil. He hasn't been able to diversify the economy in the way that Angolan leaders have been promising to do literally for decades, which means that poor Angolans in particular, and also the middle class, continue to feel the pinch from the economic downturn. I think a few years into Lourenço's presidency, in about 2020, just after the first wave of COVID, we started to see popular protest now against Lourenço. Popular protest which had begun in the dos Santos era now came back for the first time under the new presidency, and I think the response of the authorities was to use force against peaceful demonstrators, as had been the case in the past. There have been some improvements in human rights. I think the media space is a bit more open. There's certainly more freedom of expression in Angola than there was a few years ago, and we've certainly seen this in the rise of the opposition in the run up to these elections. But as you say, still profound human rights challenges, and those are sort of deepening dissatisfaction.
And Justine, we have 8 political parties going for this election, but it looks as if just 2 are the major political parties, the MPLA and UNITA, as highlighted by you. But what do you think would be the major conversation that could sway the voters electing the next president?
I think it'll be everyday issues of poverty, inequality, unemployment. I mean, that's what people are most concerned about. Whether among the poor or among the middle class who are feeling the economic squeeze. It's about sorting out the fundamental issues of jobs and a decent standard of living for all.
And let's talk about corruption, which is when you talk about poverty, the talk or the fight against corruption is top on the list of things that some of the Angolans would like to see. For instance, we saw Lourenço probe dos Santos' government for corruption, and that made him an enemy of the former president's children. Don't you think that there's a likelihood that they may be against him because now it looks like a bigger force coming against him in this particular election?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this combination of different grievances, sort of economic and political, that I've already spoken about. On the other side, I think the opposition is much better organized than it's ever been in the past. I think the fact that UNITA in 2019 elected a new leader in the person of Adalberto Costa Jr., who represents a change of generation and a new image for UNITA. I think somebody who can appeal to a wide spectrum of Angolan society. Historically, UNITA's roots were always in the interior of the country. UNITA was always regarded with deep suspicion by people in the capital, Luanda. I think Adalberto Costa Jr. has been very successful in building upon a kind of groundswell of civic opposition to the government that started in Luanda. So to find common cause with a movement that's emerged spontaneously from within Angolan society, and to incorporate their demands into UNITA's political platform. And at the same time, he has traveled to the interior of the country and shown that he can retain the trust among UNITA's traditional constituency as well. Also, it's a list system for Parliament, and I think strategically what UNITA has done is to include in its own electoral list people who were associated with civil society or with other political parties, but who have a personal following of their own. And so I think, UNITA has managed to present itself now not so much as a sectarian political party, but as part of a broad coalition representing a broad range of interests within Angolan society.
So, Justin, let's quickly welcome Edmilson Angelo, who's live with us from Luanda. He's a doctoral researcher and expert on Angolan studies. Good to see you, Edmilson.
Thank you.
Quickly here, let us in on the mood, at the moment in Angola as the country elects its next president.
Thank you very much. And obviously, I will take the opportunity to greet Justin, who is a very, very good friend of mine. Hello, Justin. The mood here right now, it's pretty much calm. I feel like it's definitely a reflection of everything that we have been thinking of how these process would be taking place. It shows a little bit of maturity from the civil society, but also a little bit of confidence within the whole process of election. There isn't much going on right now. Obviously, the polls have closed. People now are starting to count the votes, and we're literally just waiting to see the first results come out. And from there, I think that will be when we're perhaps going to be seeing more things happening. There's a lot going on in the digital space. A lot of memes being created. A lot of communication happens between voters within the digital space. But in terms of the mood from this side, people are actually proud to see that the voting stations have closed and there haven't been any major issue happening over here. So the mood here is the same as it was when the polls pretty much opened.
Edmilson, you talked about memes. It then means that the social media is another aspect in this whole election. Did any of the candidates utilize the opportunity on social media?
100%. I feel like one of the biggest takeaways from this election is the fact that this is indeed the solidification of the importance of the digital space within Angolan politics, And I feel like much of what happened with UNITA on its own is also partly because of how much they managed to integrate within this digital space at an earlier stage. Social media has become, for young people in particular in Angola, not just a space for people to communicate and participate, but also a space to resist disinformation, to resist any sort of attempt from the government to try and perhaps, try to disinform people. So social media has indeed become a powerful weapon. And we noticed that in the last 30 days, we've been seeing the ruling party trying to do more in terms of the digital space. But I feel like this slow adaptation from the ruling party within the digital space has also, in a way or another, actually had a big impact on how much people have actually been putting pressure on the system. But definitely, I feel like this election will definitely be the solidification of the digital space within Angolan politics.
And Justin and I, we were trying to, make sense of what the main agenda will be, to cause or to sway voters, because this is the very first time we're looking at UNITA making a bolder statement. And we've also seen that the MPLA has also accused the Dos Santos family of sponsoring UNITA. Is there anything wrong in having a family or individuals as sponsors of an opposition political party?
There's nothing wrong with it. Sorry. I think that was, I don't know if that was for Justin or for myself.
No, I actually wanted you, Edmilson. I'll come back to Justin.
Okay, right. So there's nothing wrong with it. I think the only issue is the fact that everything around what has been going on with the body of the former president. A few days ago, we actually had one of the sons of Savimbi, the first president of the opposition party, also coming out in support of the ruling party. It's just the fact that everything that is going on literally has made this whole idea of people, changing or promoting, or trying to push people to vote either for UNITA or for the MPLA to be a massive issue. And obviously, I think for the ruling party, the fact that it has been really strong in this fight against corruption, they are actually associating everything that the family of the former president is doing with the opposition party, saying that, this is a party that is getting support from corrupt people, and this is the reason why people shouldn't even support them. But the truth of the matter is that people are not really paying attention to that too much. People are really more sympathized with the family because of the way people have been dealing with the body of the former president. And I think just to add on to what Justin was saying in terms of how much this is also for UNITA, the moment where they now have the power to direct how people see them in terms of civil society, because up until these elections, the way people perceive UNITA was pretty much based on how much the ruling party would say it. UNITA was literally a synonym of war and conflict for many people. But this narrative did not work anymore. And I think now more than ever, the power is within UNITA's hand to really direct the way people see them as a political party.
And Justin, I think, let me bring in Justin here, because Adalberto Costa Jr., who is 60, is a candidate of UNITA, and he's a member of the National Assembly of Angola. Now, what's the strength of the candidate flying the flag of UNITA?
What is the strength for flying the flag of UNITA? I think it's building on the base of UNITA as a historic party in Angola. For some that carries an advantage. As I was saying earlier, also Adalberto Costa Jr. has also had to overcome quite a lot of historic prejudice against UNITA in certain sections of Angolan society. But I think what we have seen over the last few years in how things have developed in Angola, and really coming to fruition in this election, is that it's a political alignment which has really put the war finally in the past. And people are now able to vote according to policy platforms rather than according to the kind of historic political alignments which had defined people's choices ever since the first election in Angola in 1992.
And Justin, some analysts and historians have said that UNITA's strength is in the fact that they are more inclined to the West. Let us in. Does this also have to do with, having to look at the Russia versus United States in global outside Africa politics?
I think those international alignments really take place in the shadows in Angola. Yes, the MPLA has historic relations with Russia, with Cuba. UNITA historically was backed by the West during the Civil War. However, I would warn against kind of understanding Angolan politics in terms of international politics. It's true that Adalberto Costa Jr. may gain more trust in Washington, for example. But, the fact remains is that since the end of the Cold War, really since the 1990s, even the MPLA, particularly as it became a more and more important exporter of oil, the MPLA was able to gain the trust and the confidence of Western support as well. So, while I think those historic alignments are in the background, for Angolan voters, it's much more about their everyday realities.
And Edmilson, people are amazed to see that the battle between both parties started way back in 1975 when they started the Civil War, which ended in 2002, lasting about 27 years. So that war was one of the battlegrounds for Russia versus the US Cold War in proxies. But in moving into this election,
right,
the Angolans, are they also looking in that direction, possibly looking outside Africa, talking about the alignment? Who is moving towards where and where?
Right. I don't think this is really these elections have not really brought in this theme, and I feel like Angolans are very much vocal in terms of how much they see these as something that we need to resolve internally. People really feel like this is home business. This has nothing to do with the international community. This is really how much I have been gathered from the ground. And the truth of the matter is that even in terms of this idea of sides, this is perhaps the election where we have seen less involvement from China. And it's interesting to see that for the past 3 years, the Lorenzo government has actually built a sort of like trust and a close tie with the West in a way that actually allowed him to use much of what he has built with the West, also throughout the whole electoral campaign. So they've been emphasizing how much investment has come from the West, the loans from the IMF, everything that they did in terms of economic transformation, the economic work has been pretty much connected to the West, and that has been something that actually been is a flag that has been waved by the ruling party MPLA, which historically obviously has more relationship with Russia and Cuba and even China. But right now in Angola, the question is not really about which type of relationship you have abroad. It's really about what are you doing internally to change the lives of many people, especially the youth. And so this question, and again, even this concept of the Cold War, and I think many people have already mentioned, for many of this generation, the war is nothing as a story that was told by the elder generation. There's no reflections of the war anymore. For many of these people, the reference is literally Angola at its peak in terms of the economy, where many young people thought that they would be wearing Louis Vuittons and Gucci, and Angola could be perhaps the African USA, and vis-a-vis the reality of many people today. So this is really what is making people be like, this is enough. And I think we have had enough, and our voices are going to be heard now more than ever. So people are not really looking outside to get answers. They actually see these as a home sort of conversation.
And Edmilson, as I say, politics is local. And a while ago, Justine and I were trying to look at some of the campaign issues leading up to this election. Top on the list looks like poverty and unemployment. Speak to us about these two and how the people have shown some form of importance in these, dilemma.
Right. So these are indeed the biggest issue that has been flagged by people who are voting this time around, because the reality of the matter is that on the previous elections, many promises were made, but this promise did not come to realization. People really asked for those promises, and it was important for the ruling party to really look at the youth as perhaps the biggest fiasco if they fail, because the signs have been there for years. Youth have been trying to voice the voices. They've been trying to protest. They've been trying to really express themselves on how much they have been suffering. And many people feel like they are losing the youth ears, and they feel like this is the time for them to change this reality. And so this is only just a tiny bit when you talk about poverty, when you talk about employment. Obviously, these are the biggest issues, but there are others. People can't afford to buy a house, people can't afford to leave the parents' house. So these all these elements that is that has been affecting civil society and the youth in a way that now more than ever you can actually sit on a table with older generation, younger generation, people are speaking the same language. This is no longer a time where the older generation has a different type of view than the younger generation. This is actually the first time where, as a country, we are all on the same page. We just need change, and whoever wins needs to get that message very, very, very clear.
And Justin, elections in Africa have becoming, are becoming big deal. We just saw what happened in Kenya, and now the world is watching Angola. And for the first time, we're getting to see that the two major political parties are going big into this election. Now, help us make sense of what this could mean for the Southern African bloc.
I think this will be watched carefully in Southern Africa. It's very significant. 5 countries in Southern Africa in particular, and I'm talking about Angola, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Namibia, South Africa, all still ruled by liberation movements that fought bitter struggles for the liberation of their various countries. In Angola and Mozambique, the respective parties have been in power since 1975. In South Africa, much more recently. But, I think still all of those parties have staked a lot of their legitimacy and their message on their historic role as a liberator. We haven't yet seen any of those parties being removed from power by democratic means, even although all of them have been facing regular elections since the 1990s. So, I think the resurgence of UNITA as an opposition movement in Angola, the resurgence of the opposition more generally, is something that will be closely watched. In the event that UNITA does win this election, I do think it'll make it much easier to see a way forward to political change in those other countries in the region as well.
Well, let's talk about the demographics, Edmilson, because looking at statistics, more than 60% of Angola's population is under 24, and the opposition seem to be marching towards this. Is that the same you're getting from where you are at the moment?
Yes, definitely. It's clear, and that was clear since we started with the whole process of campaigning, where even President Lorenzo said, the youth are going to decide these elections. It was very, very clear since the beginning that this is going to be the elections of the youth, and I feel like whatever would happen wrong, they will also blame the youth. And that's why even the political behavior of the youth has been sort of like very, very, very correct, just for them to pass a message that we don't want any chaos. We just want our voices to be heard. And obviously, since the beginning of Lorenzo's mandate, there was already signs that when we get to these elections, this is going to be about the youth. Every time the government attempt to create something to get around the youth and mobilize the youth would already create something, a counter disinformation to really show the government that we be the ones deciding who wins the elections. I remember there was hashtags that were created by the ruling party, which pretty much was promoting this idea that they already won the election. There was, in 2002, just that it's already done. They were trying to pass the message that they already won the election. And then the youth came up with a counter hashtag saying, no, in 2022, you like it, basically saying that, no, there's no winner yet. We will be the ones deciding who wins these elections. And I think the signs have been there throughout this whole time. And now more than ever, those political parties have decided to focus more in trying to speak the language of the youth. Obviously, they are getting the benefit of these whole elections. And I feel like for many young people in Angola, regardless of the outcome, for many young people in Angola, is actually being proud to see that one of the most powerful political systems in Angola, not just in Angola, but in Africa as a whole, is actually being put into check by a young generation of voters in a way that we have never seen before. Regardless of the outcome, people know that they managed to put pressure into one of the most powerful systems in Africa. And I feel like this is the reason why, regardless of these results, these state-system relationship in Angola will never be the same, because now more than ever, people are understanding and are finding the spaces where they can navigate and move around the system that governs them.
And Justine, let's look at the previous Angola elections, which have always been largely one-sided. But in 1992, in its first multi-party election, there was something as close as this between late Eduardo dos Santos and Jonas Savimbi.
Yeah. I think the 1992 election was held in exceptional circumstances. It was part of a process that was meant to bring an end to the civil war. Neither the MPLA nor UNITA was really committed to that protest, to that process. They didn't trust each other at all. They both retained armed forces under the control of the parties, in spite of an agreement for armed forces to be merged into a united national army. As a result of that, the civil war resumed in early 1993, after, as you say, a very, very close result in that election. The first post-war election, which was the 2008 election, that was when Dos Santos, as serving president and as the MPLA party candidate, really claimed for himself this title of the Architect of Peace. So it was partly that. It was partly a climate of fear that prevailed after the war that delivered for the MPLA that massive victory in the 2008 election. And I think with each successive election since then, you've seen the MPLA's share of the vote being slowly eroded by a number of different factors, partly the economic situation and partly about new generations coming up and voting, for whom the memory of the war is no longer so significant. So, we're now in a situation where the result could be very, very close, but, we're in a very different set of circumstances from what we were in 1992. In that, it's no longer an election effectively held in the middle of a war situation, as was the case in 1992. But, an election which is taking place in a time of peace. Whether the MPLA will accept defeat, if they are defeated, is another big question. I think there are concerns around the transparency of the vote counting process. Back in the last election, 2017, the opposition parties raised concerns over the lack of transparency in the process. Those concerns were dismissed by the Electoral Commission, which remains dominated by MPLA and government appointees. And the Electoral Commission went ahead to certify the results in spite of the objections of the opposition. Now, in that sense, nothing has changed since 2017. There've been no improvements in the transparency around the process. The Electoral Commission potentially remains quite partisan. So I do think the concern here could be with the credibility of the poll, given the lack of transparency and the lack of recourse to challenge the outcome, if that's what the opposition feel they would want to do.
I'll come back to you, Justin. Let's quickly bring in Edmilson here. And we're trying to look at women in politics on the continent. We've seen women making some good incursion. We now have some female presidents on the continent. And just in Kenya, the party had a deputy presidential candidate. But in your country, Flor Bella Bella of the Humanist Party of Angola is the first woman to run for president in the country. Tell us more about her.
Right. So this is a woman that obviously she's not and it's not new within the political space in Angola. She was a member of UNITA. But the only problem with her own party is the fact that they literally came out of nowhere. Even though the whole concept of humanizing Angola, of before anything we need to be need to care to one another, and she took an approach of looking at the country sort of like a family, whereby she's the mother, and she started to really showcase how important it is for people to have somebody like her, somebody like a mother, to care for its citizens. So the approach was actually quite interesting from a perspective of solidarity and all the issues that the country has been facing right now. But the reality of the matter is that when you talk about women empowerment, it's very difficult to connect with her political party or even with her decision to run for presidency, because the women that are actually being headlining in terms of politics in Angola, they're actually part of the ruling party. And funny enough, this has been one of the biggest flags that the ruling party has been waving for the campaign, because this is the first time, if the MPLA wins, that they will have a woman being in the position, the vice president of the country, a woman leading the parliament as well. So this is something that actually has been one of the biggest, I guess, the biggest toll within the ruling party's campaign. But obviously, we are in a time where the youth is the majority. If maybe this election was taking place 10 years ago, when it was really about the power of women in Angola, perhaps MPLA would perhaps be ahead of the curve by now. But the truth of the matter is that people are not really looking at in that perspective, and that's why people didn't really move with the idea of voting for our first president in Angola, and people were more concerned with experience, and I think perhaps that's why UNITA did pretty well, bringing in people that are extremely experienced in terms of the political space in Angola, but also people that are really respected. When you unify leaders like the ones that are around Alberto, you start questioning, this is something that could work, while at the same time, if it doesn't work, if they don't win, how much would these leaders that decided to join in with him really take on just a position of a deputy, or would they try and create a new party? So there are all these questions that are going to be very interesting for us to find out. But in terms of women empowerment, right now in Angola, when you talk about women empowerment, the first thing that comes into mind, the first examples are people like Vera Dalves, who is the Minister of Finance. Because of everything that she has been doing, she's seen as somebody that actually one of the best decisions coming from the ruling party in terms of putting women in a position where it can really, make our whole economy better. But also this strategy from the ruling party of putting women as vice president, women as leading the parliament as well. But I guess for Malakia, it's not really a moment where we perhaps see her getting a seat in the parliament. So far, this doesn't seem like it. But we're perhaps going to see now more women candidates in the future coming even from UNITA or even MPLA.
Let's bring in Justine, and Justine is surely going to help us here go back in history, because there seem to be some kind of leadership roles for women now in politics on the continent. And we recall Salif Johnson, Joyce Banda, and of course now Suluhu Hassan, and quite a number of others. Let us in on how this is going. It looks as if there's a sort of reawakening that the women can actually hold political office instead of appointive offices, as we've seen in other countries.
Yeah, I mean it's a gradual process. Some countries have particularly put mechanisms in place to promote women in politics. Some with more success than others. Rwanda and South Africa, for example. Rwanda has a quota system in parliament. In South Africa, the ANC has a quota system for gender on its party lists, and this has certainly increased women's representation in parliament. I think there are all sorts of factors working against women rising to the top positions. I think a lot of sexism in the everyday business of campaigning, whether within the party itself or in the approach to voters. holding women back. So, you know, I think it's a slow process, but one in which progress can continue to be made.
And Edmilson, young voters we spoke about, history of battles and a close election are the major factors. Now, tell us more about the interest. It looks as if the more young Angolans are participating in this particular election for the very first time. The numbers are really high.
Yes, 100%. This is our election, and I speak as a youth of Angola. So this is really the moment where we see these as our moment, our moment. We for many years we had this saying, young people, you don't talk politics. This is something that has been governing our country for many years, But this has changed now. Today, now people are forced to listen to us because we are the biggest voice in the country. And most of the times, like the new generation of young voters, they're not the same as the ones in the 90s. This is a generation that is well informed, a generation that knows exactly what they want, a generation that is not asking for much, but a generation that will be, will hold you accountable to your promises, And I feel like now more than ever, many decisions that the government did, even in terms of trying to invest into youth, in putting young people into political positions, and then giving them 1 month, 2 months, and they're taken away just because they thought that, they want to pass the message that youth are not ready to govern yet. All these things have backfired the ruling party. And I feel like everything that is happening today is a combination of many things that the youth has been trying to say, but they were just being ignored. Or maybe would just be used, whenever they try to speak out, they would actually be confronted with violence. So right now, this is really the moment where the youth feels like we have come up with our spaces to defend ourselves. We have now understand that we are building something where we can do real checks and balance between people are governed and people are governed. And I feel like social media has played such an important role in this whole process. And this is definitely the time where the youth know exactly that this is our elections, and whatever happens, either it's going to be blamed on us or it's going to be congratulated on us. So that's the reason why we are seeing now more than ever a lot of young people participating. And again, even those in the diaspora who are feeling like maybe the vote doesn't matter, the fact that they're actually participating in this whole process, it allows them to maximize the voices of people back home as well. So this is the reason why this is such an important moment for the Angolan youth, because I feel like this is the moment where people are like, you're not going to waste our youth year just like that. And we are going to be doing everything we can to make sure that you get these messages right, regardless of which party you are.
And here comes our historian to help us make sense on this one. I bring in Dr. Justin again. Once upon a time, young Africans were freedom fighters, and these leaders will woke up someday. It's as if the young people forgot that they got the firepower to actually push and ensure that they have a better country and better community. Now, let's look at the numbers. 15 million Angolans have registered to vote, and less than half of the 35 million in the country now. The young people, according to Edmilson, for the very first time in a long time, is saying that this is ours. What do you think is responsible for this, Justin?
I think, as you say, young people in Africa have historically been liberation fighters, and the fact remains that the liberation fighters of 1975 are still the generation who are in charge in Angola. The fact that the youth now do have a voice, it's the result of a generation having emerged which can put that old politics of the Civil War firmly behind them, having a very clear demographic majority now. And as Edmilson's been saying, I think social media is an advantage that the youth had, which obviously their parents and grandparents didn't. And it's social media which has enabled youth in Angola to start mobilizing. It was really only in 2011 that you started to see any kind of real popular mobilization on the streets in Angola. That was a youth movement that came mostly out of the hip hop scene. It was started by musicians who were able to to rally support behind behind their message. And that we're talking about a decade after the end of the war there. So though that was started by people who were kids when the war ended, as time's gone on, this willingness to speak out, to mobilize, to be on the streets, is one that's spread throughout society, and in creating that kind of space on the streets, but also through social media. It's the youth have been at the forefront now of setting a political agenda for about 10 years. I think a large part of UNITA's success in the last few years has been in its ability to tap into that energy, which has been created by the youth, and that brings us to where we are today, at an election where the youth vote, if the poll is free and fair, will be decisive in the outcome.
And Justin, it's the 5th election since 1992 and the 4th since 2002. That's pretty long a time. Take us through that period, because people are saying, well, never again. As Edmilson is saying, this is ours. Some are saying, well, we'll never have it this long, coming again. There must be a democratic process in place. How can, Angola ensure that the democratic space is given some breather to ensuring that there is some seeming growth for others to come in?
How does it preserve the democratic space? I think these elections are going to be a test, in that we will have to see whether these elections are free and fair. And as I said earlier, I do have concerns that the popular will might not be reflected in the result of this election. In which case we'll be here again having the same conversation in 5 years' time, except probably with even more angry people on the streets now. I think if there is an alternation of power, if the opposition wins this election, at least that breaks the stranglehold of that the MPLA has had over politics for so many years. And I think just that one change of power will be healthy. And I think one change of power possibly creates the conditions for more changes of power in the future. As we've seen in Kenya, ever since the Liberation Party was voted out of power in Kenya, you've had an extraordinarily complex realignment of political forces in Kenya with every successive election. Zambia, we've seen that since the early 90s, with the same party in power for about 30 years. Once that one party was able to be voted out, we've seen a pretty frequent and healthy alternation between parties in Zambia, with a more kind of dynamic, greater dynamism, greater variety in the political forces that exist. And so, I think a win by the opposition in Angola will be a first positive step towards the consolidation of a more inclusive and representative kind of politics.
And talking about a win, quickly here, because if there's anything that will excite voters in Nigeria, it has to do with the huge number of Nigerians living outside Nigeria. Call them the diasporan voters. But for Angolans, this is a first, because Angolans in the diaspora, Edmilson, are allowed to vote, and that's expected to be significant.
A moment, especially in terms of it has an impact, even in terms of just simple terms, right? Is the fact that for the very first time we have got people in the diaspora participating within this whole process of election in Angola. Obviously, we only chose 12 countries, and these are the countries where you have a higher representation of Angolans living there. But I will definitely see here, and I've been getting a lot of feedback from these different countries where people are still questioning whether the votes really matter, because obviously, even though you are voting in the different countries, yet the votes are going to have to be counted in Luanda. So just the fact that the votes have to be moved back to Luanda are really allowing people to question whether the votes really matter. But like I said, whether it matters or not is the fact that you become part of a conversation where you can maximize the voices and you can put more pressure. So we can see in different stations abroad where there's young people broadcasting live saying how much they are proud to be able to vote for Angola for the first time. Even older generation that never even went back to the country, they are, participating in this whole process. And there's a sense of proudness, which in a way is also helps in terms of building an identity abroad, what it means to be Angolan. So there's a lot of positive signs that we can take it from these. But like I said, the momentum so far, and perhaps this is why it will be very interesting for us to see the results, is that based on the barometer that we had to analyze how much, what the outcome might be, there are only two options, especially for the opposition party, whether they win it or they increase the seats within the parliament. I think that's perhaps going to be the result that people are going to accept it, because and I think this is something that the MPLA likes to do whenever they're analyzing how much they won, they use the analogy of football, and they look at it as a classic between Real Madrid and Barcelona, where they usually win 5-0 in many camps. But I feel like this time around, it's impossible for them to come and say, look, here we won 5-0. No. Either it's a draw or you lost in many different camps. And I feel like this is perhaps the moment where this is extremely important, because this pressure is not just going to be from home, it's also going to be from the diaspora. So this is a very interesting element.
I hope I didn't get a bias there in terms of those sporting clubs. Now, let me bring in Justin. Justin, the talk here is deep, and I'm happy we're having this conversation. Angola is making us look at Africa as one united community. And the talk is that we have a lot of Africans who live outside the continent. So irrespective of the country you live in, tell us what you think, African countries like Angola, Nigeria is also preparing for its next election. So what do you think they should do to ensuring that these Africans who live outside their countries of birth are also given a pride of place in the conversations back home?
I think social media obviously plays a big part here. On the WhatsApp group or the Facebook conversation, it doesn't matter whether you're in Angola or on the other side of the world. And I think that's been very important in maintaining a sense of belonging, a sense of being part of a diaspora, but also being connected to the home country. In terms of political participation, I know it's often not easy to vote when you're abroad. Sometimes the only voting station will be in the capital city of a particular country, and if you're living somewhere on the other side of that country, it's not going to be easy to vote. So I guess means like postal voting, online voting, all could be things to consider, as long as they can be done safely and legitimately. Could be things that could be considered to increase political participation in those diaspora communities.
And Edmilson, the elections are over at the moment, and has the tallying going? Talking about the collation of results in Angola.
Right. So right now, obviously, we will be seeing the Electoral Commission, coming on live to give updates on how everything is going. We haven't really got any updates on any station yet. But there was also this big debate around vote and seat or vote and go, and we've been seeing actually some youth that actually voted and are outside playing, PlayStation, playing football, waiting for the results to come out in some of the stations. So we'll definitely see perhaps towards the end of the night, maybe in some station already some predictions of how things are looking. But so far there isn't much. Obviously, just the online space where people are making hashtags, where people are making memes, where people are making fun of the ruling party, where people are already, in a way or another, celebrating the fact that they managed to mimic the ruling party in the moment when they actually said they're going to do, which is the elections. But I guess tomorrow will be perhaps the day where we'll be able to perhaps get a little bit of more sense of how things are going to look like. And obviously, we also have to remember that we might actually, through this whole process as well, get a little bit of a little bit of more information on the bearing of the former president, which is also going to be perhaps this coming days. So we might see a mix of information here, but so far we haven't really got much in terms of the outcomes of the vote so far. So I think tomorrow we're going to be able to touch more on that.
And Justin, something that this is a level playing field for both candidates, knowing full well that is the last term in office for the outgoing president in Angola. How does this help the candidates of the ruling party and the opposition, UNITA?
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I didn't catch your question.
No, this is the last term for the outgoing president. And for some, they believe that is more or less like a level playing field for the two candidates that are coming for these two big parties, the MPLA and UNITA. And I'm asking if that's sort of true about a level playing field, because there's no power of incumbency, so to speak, for any of the candidates apart from a ruling party.
I mean, there's certainly a power of incumbency in this election, in that, the MPLA still controls a large part of the media. The fact that, in many parts of Angola, the only radio station you can get, or the only TV station you can get, is the state-controlled one. And, as I mentioned earlier, the domination of the Electoral Commission by government and ruling party appointees means that you can't really talk about a level playing field at this point.
Are we likely to see what's happened in Kenya? And a lot of people thought that the power of incumbency and the fight between the incumbent and outgoing president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, against his deputy Raila Odinga, now president-elect, may just play out in Angola.
The power of incumbency?
No, because the power of incumbency, I'm saying that the power of incumbency didn't go the way of Raila Odinga. So that's what I'm asking, if that could also be replicated in Angola.
Look, I'm not going to predict the future. All I can say is that I'm concerned that the electoral process might not be transparent. I think in a fair contest, the result would be very, very close. And I can't really make predictions about how the vote counting and tallying process is going to go in the next few days.
So, Edmilson, do you share in that?
Yes, definitely. I think this is totally different in terms of predictions, because it's different. It's something new, and it's never really been seen before to this level, and that's why it's literally very hard for us to make any predictions, because there's just so many things going on that one can definitely be surprised, and that's why we just need to perhaps wait and see what happens.
How optimistic are you with the conduct so far by the Electoral Commission?
I feel like overall, I think there has been a lot of good signs in terms of maturity, and I think that's the good thing about elections. The more we continue to do elections, the more we get used to it, the more opposition are going to get stronger, the more electorate's going to understand what it's like to participate. And this is the good thing about it. At the end of the day, we're still a very young democracy, and I feel like for this election we have done really well so far, and there hasn't been any sort of fear, any sort of issues that perhaps diminish the whole process. But like I said, I think the bigger question is the process of counting the votes, and that's perhaps where we'll see a lot of scandals come out and a lot of questions being asked. But overall, in terms of how people have behaved, in terms of how the whole process has actually been running, I feel like there is a lot of good signs and there's a lot of positive things to take away. But like I said, we're gonna have to wait to hear and to see the process of counting, and because that's perhaps where we might see a little bit of issues happening.
And how is the counting going, Edmilson? Manually or electronically?
Manually, actually. People are counting manually, and then they are sending into the central Electoral Commission, and then obviously as time goes, they're gonna start, sharing the votes already. There are some stations where people have been saying that there hasn't been any members of the opposition party, and how come they've been asking how fair the elections will be. But like I said, Angola is a big country. There are 18 provinces, and until all the voting for all the stations come back to Luanda, and for us to get a grip of how things are looking like, will take a while, but so far, there seems to be running smoothly. Just before I jump into the interview, I was listening to the updates again, where they were just announcing that the poll station have closed everywhere, and now they started with the counties, and very soon they're gonna come back again to speak to the public.
And Justin, you worry about what may happen. You're skeptical about the counting, the tally, and the process so far. Tell us, that's just not about Angola. It's a worry that a lot of people share on the continent, Nigeria inclusive.
Yeah, certainly. I can't speak to the situation in Nigeria particularly, but I know it's a concern in many places. I think here in South Africa, despite a lot of other problems in the political process, the voting process does have a lot of checks and balances, and I think it's free and fair in that, you have an electoral commission which is not under political control. You have a tradition of kind of civil society participation, the possibility of opposition representatives at polling stations all the time. And, all that's respected, and it adds up to a credible result. I think that's one example that can be followed. Making sure that there is scrutiny at every single polling station and every single step of the way. Now, I know it can be difficult for opposition parties in particular to have the forces at their disposal, to have the sheer numbers of qualified people at their disposal to put them as representatives at every polling station. But I think it's a goal to work towards. And I do think, based on the experience of the last election, where there were enormous questions waiting to be asked, Angola does still have some way to go in that respect.
And Edmilson, so what's the report so far, talking about the conduct security-wise? Has there been a peaceful elections in most parts of the country?
Right, very peaceful indeed, and there hasn't been any issue reported. And actually, that was something that they said in the last intervention from the Electoral Commission. They were also trying to praise, the behavior, the political behavior of everyone who went out to vote, and also obviously even though it wasn't really necessary to do it the way they did it, but the security service was also out there just to ensure that nothing goes wrong. And the country was also very proud to see countries like the US not sending recommendations to the citizens to leave Angola. So there have been a lot of signs here of we are actually growing as a democracy, and we should be proud to again, even though people were asking how much would this election be, a boom or bust, and the fact of the matter is that if the process happened very smoothly, people are home. People are in a way or another actually celebrating the fact that they voted. More people actually turn out to be participating within this conversation of voting. So there's been no issue in terms of security, even in areas that could perhaps be questionable, like the Lundas, like Cabinda. We haven't heard anything coming out from there in terms of issue and security issues. And so I think overall there's been a lot of positive signs on that. So no complaints on that side.
And what about the first time? What about the first-time voters? How excited are they?
Right, the aspirational voters, as I call them. I think this is indeed the moment where people, this is the generation that they are even younger than our generation, that in a way or another, still have a little bit of connection with the war, because we always used to hear this sentence that people used to say, in 1992 was worse. This is how the older generation would say it to us. And I think for many people today, they actually see these elections as perhaps the real second elections of Angola, because it's the only one that actually had a lot of similarities with the one in 1992. So many young people in Angola that never even voted, they are just happy to be able to participate, in the whole process of generation. And obviously, this young generation, they are very influenced by the peers, right? So obviously by now, and this is actually another interesting thing about the digital space, which is something that if you look at history, is actually very connected to Lorenzo, because before in Angola, the youth used to talk politics within private digital space like WhatsApp. That's where people used to talk politics. And then when Lorenzo came into power, the first thing that he did, he actually created pages within social media, asking people that from now on, there will be a sort of proximity between people who are governing and the youth in particular. But the problem is, by doing that, it literally opened the doors for the digital space for everyone to talk politics, even though he managed to silence voices that are actually very vocal, who for many people, before you used to be, for you to talk politics in spaces like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you are seen as somebody that is extremely brave. So when Ashley comes into this space and he opens up that space, people used to be seen as special, they're no longer special, but you open a space where we are all politicians, whether it's people are making memes, whether it's just people are sharing. So now I feel like this space that the government opened, and then they realized that they can't handle, so they sort of had to go back and close the traditional space, which is TV, radios, because they realized quickly that the digital space has been open to an extent where there's no more way for them to close it. So this is very interesting. And obviously, these new voters, they are the one leading within these spaces, and they're perhaps the ones who are going to be, celebrating regardless of the outcome, because they feel like they're actually participating in a very crucial moment for the country.
And Justin, what do you have to say about that style? Because he said that all of a sudden we had more politicians, citizens, journalists, all on social media.
Yeah, and I think it's been an extraordinary turnaround since, I was in Angola in the first post-war election of 2008. And, the climate of fear around that election. Yes, I mean, it was Dos Santos with his message of the architect of peace, but, the reputation of the architect of peace was backed up by the fact that he had the state security services to do his bidding as well. People were genuinely frightened of voting for the opposition in that election. Something I saw today through social media, of course, there's a civil society organization in Angola which has been doing exit polls. In other words, going around polling stations, asking people if they would like voluntarily to say who they voted for, and this organization has been then keeping a tally. Now, according to their results, something like 70% of the people polled were voting for the opposition. Now, I'm not saying that this outcome is necessarily accurate. What's really interesting is that if this poll is wrong, it's wrong on the side of the opposition. In other words, people are now much freer to talk about voting for the opposition and are possibly a little bit ashamed to admit to a researcher that they're voting for the government. And that for me is just a sign of how things have turned around, that nobody really wants now to admit that they're actually voting for the government, irrespective of how they did in fact actually vote.
I'd like to thank you both for being such nice company. For those who are watching us from across the continent, you can catch up on the on updates on the Angola election. I'd like to thank Dr. Justine Pearce, who is a researcher at Angolan history and politics at the Stellenbosch University in South Africa, and of course Edmilson Angelo, a doctoral researcher and expert, Angolan studies. And I hope that someday Edmilson and I will talk sports.
Definitely.
Thank you, and bye-bye.